Are you tired of losing chess games? If you are, then this video is right for you. Most chess players work countless hours on their chess opening, mainly concentrating on the main lines and their ideas, neglecting important side variations. In this video, I will show you an amazing sub-variation against the fried liver attack that is sure to catch your opponent off guard, landing you a quick win or at least the better game. Now, onto the chessboard. Hello everyone and welcome. Let's first see how white got to this position. He plays pawn to e4, we go pawn to e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, the bishop comes to c4, already putting a lot of pressure here on f7, we go knight to f6, develop our knight, and here white plays knight to f7, again now with the double threat of knight and bishop attacking on f7, and this is the fried liver attack. The best way for black to continue here, and the only way, is to go pawn to d5, sacrificing a pawn. Pawn takes on d5, and here the main continuation is to go knight to a5, but we're going to surprise white here and we're going to play this move, pawn to b5, sacrificing another pawn. Now put yourself in white's shoes here. We just gave you a free pawn with pawn to d5, which you captured, and now this pawn is ready to take our knight here, and now we decided to give you yet another pawn with pawn to b5, hitting this bishop here. So what are you going to play with white here? Let me know down in the comments what move would you play. Out of all the juicy options that white has in this position, we can take on b5, we can take on c6. Believe it or not, the best move in this position is to retreat this bishop here all the way back to f1. If you found this move, you are a true master of this opening. Let's now discuss what happens if white plays any other moves. So returning to our position after pawn to b5, let's see what happens if white decides to capture this pawn here with bishop takes on b5. Well, in this case, we're going to capture here on d5 with our queen. And notice that we're threatening to take on this bishop on b5, but we're also hitting the pawn on g2. And since we're hitting two pieces at once, white is not just going to retreat the bishop back to f1 to protect the pawn. Instead, he's going to take here on c6. We're going to capture with our queen. And since we're still threatening the pawn on g2, most of the time, white castles here in this position. Here we're going to play bishop to b7 with a very nasty idea. We want to checkmate the white king with queen takes on g2. In this position, there are three ways for white to deal with this checkmate. He can go pawn to f3, knight to f3, or simply put the queen on f3. If pawn to f3, we're simply going to go h6, attack this knight. This knight has to go somewhere. If it comes here to e4, well, it's well protected. We have 1, 2, 3 pieces attacking the square. So if the knight goes there, we're just going to recapture with everything. And at the end, we're still going to have the checkmate threat here on g2. So the knight instead is going to retreat all the way back with knight to h3. Here, we're going to continue to attack. We're going to go pawn to g5. The idea of this move is simple. We want to play pawn to g4. And if pawn captures, we want to deliver again checkmate on g2. From this position, it's also important to notice that the main idea for black is to also go bishop to c5 with an attack on the king with check, and also castle the king. These are the main moves that we want to play in combination with the pawn to g4 with the checkmate on g2. Here, most players playing with the white pieces are going to play knight to f2, trying to cover the square on g4. But anyways, we're going to play this pawn forward. Again, if he takes, we're going to deliver checkmate here. And if knight takes, we're going to go knight takes on g4. And after pawn takes, again, we have this checkmate idea. So after g4, a lot of players here are going to play pawn to d3. They're not really going to take here. But notice that after we take here, and after queen takes, trying to trade the queens, thinking that there's going to be no attack, we're going to be able to take the queen. And after pawn takes, we open this g file now for the rook. So we're going to go rook to g8. And here white is going to either give us a free piece or be in checkmate. Notice that if king goes to h1, bishop takes on f3 is checkmate. So the only way to deal with this threat and not lose the game immediately is to either play this bishop to g5, which we're going to just recapture with the rook with the same idea, with the same threat. Or place this knight here on g4. And after we play pawn to h5, that's going to be a free piece, and we're going to end up winning this game very easily. So let's now go back and see what happens if white plays any other move, such as knight to f3. In this position, The knight was here on g5, remember, and he went to f3 to block this checkmate idea that we have here on g2. Here, we're going to castle our king. Notice that we could play pawn to e4, but we don't really want to do that. If we play the pawn to e4, we're going to get in the way of these two pieces, and we don't really want to do that. We're going to castle here instead. Now, look at the lack of development that white has in this position. So most likely, they're going to play a move like knight to c3, or they're going to play a move like d3. If they play pawn to d3, here we're going to hit them with a very nasty move, pawn to g5. The idea, again, very simple, guys. We want to go pawn to g4, and after this knight moves, we want to deliver checkmate on g2. So a lot of times, white is just going to capture this pawn with the bishop. It's a free pawn, so why not? But by sacrificing this pawn, we gave now this open g file for our rook to attack. We're hitting this bishop, so right away, this bishop is not really protected by the knight. So notice that on the next move, we're going to capture this bishop, and the knight cannot take because of the same idea, checkmate on g2. So he has to do something about this bishop. If he goes back, there's going to be a lot of checkmates together with this rook here on g2. Very dangerous attack. So white is gonna capture on f6. We're going to capture with our queen, and now we're threatening again to capture on this knight, taking advantage of the fact that there's a pin here on the g file. Most of the time here, white's going to play knight to d2, protecting the knight, and here we're just going to play bishop to h6 with the threat of just to capture on d2, winning the game on the spot. It's funny, I looked in the database and a lot of players here play knight to e4, thinking that they're going to block the diagonal here, but after black captures on e4, they cannot capture back because they lose the queen on d1. All right, so we've covered both f3 and knight to f3. Now it's time to see what happens when white plays queen to f3, directly challenging our queen here on c6. And remember, we do not want to trade these queens because we are down 2 pawns. So we want to keep pieces on the board, especially our queen and bishop, which have this great target here on g2. Here we're going to continue by harassing this queen. We don't really want to trade it. So we're going to go pawn to e4, attacking this queen here. White's going to play queen to e3, and here we're going to start harassing this knight again with pawn to h6. This knight has no square, so it will have to go back to h3, and here we're simply going to castle, giving another pawn away with queen takes on a7. If white decides to take this pawn, we're going to hit them with bishop to c5. Notice that a lot of the squares for this queen are taken now. So the only square that it can go is this square here. So after queen goes to a5, here we have a very nasty idea. We're going to go pawn to e3 with the same checkmate idea on g2 with the queen and bishop. So after white plays f3 to block the checkmate idea, here we're going to take on d2 with the discovered check on the king. They're going to block here. They can already lose a piece with pawn takes on c1, but instead of capturing that, we're actually going to promote, get a queen, and after rook takes, notice that we are going to take, and it's going to be checkmate because this knight is pinned. So the only way is to go queen back, and we're going to capture this queen with a beautiful checkmate on the king. All right, so we've covered the main variations after bishop takes on b5. So what happens if instead of bishop takes on b5, what happens if we capture this knight instead? If we capture here, we're just going to take the bishop on c4. Now, this pawn here is very weak. And notice that this pawn that is on c4 and looks very weird is actually making life very difficult for white. They cannot push any of these 2 pawns because we can just take them and ruin the pawn structure. In this position instead, a lot of players are just going to castle. We're going to play h6, again, taking advantage of this knight that's just misplaced now. We're going to continue to harass this knight. The knight comes to f3, trying to take this pawn here on e5. Again, we're going to push this pawn forward, kick this knight back. Notice that this knight does not have a lot of good squares. So for that reason, this rook is going to come to e1, taking advantage that it's pinned down the e-file. But we're just going to develop our bishop, put a bishop on e6. Now, again, this threat is a real threat. The knight's going to come to e5, and we're going to hit this knight again. Notice how many times this knight has moved. And in the meantime, we have developed all of our pieces attacking this knight here. And since the knight does not have any good squares to go to, it is going to sacrifice itself here on d7, Now, at least if we capture it with our knight or our bishop, we are only going to lose a pawn for it. But we don't want just a pawn, we want checkmate. And in this position, we have the beautiful Greek sacrifice. So we can go bishop takes on h2, king takes on h2, and after knight to g4, it doesn't matter where this king goes, we're going to go queen to h4, and it's going to be checkmate very soon on this king here. For example, if they play a move like pawn to d4, we take here on f2, the king moves back, queen to h4 check, and we're going to give a few more check, and then it's going to be checkmate here on this square. I hope you guys liked the video, and if you want to see what to do against the main variation of bishop to f1, let me know down in the comments and I will make a video about this unusual move, this unusual retreat back to f1. Alright guys, thank you for watching, I'll see you on the next one.